For the first time since the Cold War, Europe's skies tremble once again, not from the thunder of warplanes, but from the soft hum of unseen drones. They drift above cities, disrupt airports, and haunt the corridors of power. Across the continent, alarms sound, not from missiles, but from uncertainty. Who controls the air? Who controls the truth? From the ruins of Mykolaiv, where families sift through ashes, searching for a photograph that survived the fire, to the quiet panic over Belgium, where airports shut down under a cloud of suspicion, the world seems to spin faster and darker. Even as Hollywood's Angelina Jolie walks fearlessly through Kherson's broken streets, comforting children beneath shell fire, the cameras capture more than courage. They capture contrast. A world divided between those who rebuild and those who destroy. So the question is no longer where the war begins, but when it ends, and whether the rest of us will recognize its shape when it does. Stay with us, because this is not just a story, but a strategic perspective that impacts global politics. Join us and accompany us so that hot issues and historic decisions can be spread. It begins, as it always does, with a sound too distant to recognize, then too close to escape. In Mykolaiv, a small settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region, that sound became a wall of flame. A missile and a Shahed drone struck almost at once, turning the main street into ruin. Where there had been a bakery, there was now silence. Where there had been laughter, only dust. Among the wreckage, a woman named Ludmila moves slowly, her hands blackened by soot. She is not searching for valuables, only for distraction. Her daughter lies in hospital, her leg and arm torn away, her body a map of burns and steel. She keeps saying, "Mom, do not cry. We will dance again." Ludmila's eyes do not blink when she speaks those words. She has already spent her tears. Nearby, her neighbor Dmitro lifts a piece of scorched timber. The room behind him is a shell, its windows gone, its roof caved in. His mother and children survived because, as he says, there was no time to be afraid. They were buried under debris, then pulled out, half alive, half in disbelief. Next door, an old man named Ivan tells his own story. After the first blast, he ran to help, only to hear the mechanical whine of another drone circling back. "I crossed myself," he says, "and thought, whatever God wills." It flew so close he could see its shadow crawl along the wall. When it struck, he threw himself to the ground. He survived. Others did not. The numbers that follow are familiar to anyone who watches the news. 9 wounded, 1 dead, 30 homes destroyed. But numbers are poor historians. They do not tell you that the 5-year-old girl who went to buy bread with her grandmother returned without a leg. They do not tell you how many mothers whisper to the dead at night because there is no priest left to do it for them. Across the map, the pattern repeats. In Zaporizhzhia, rescuers are wounded by drones as they try to save others. In Kramatorsk, shells fall on industrial blocks where women still sweep the dust away each morning. In Chernihiv, homes vanish in seconds. In Sumy, even the bread vans, symbols of daily life, are struck as they drive between villages. But not every story ends with silence. In Dnipro's intensive care unit, a man named Alexander Kolichev opens his eyes after 2 weeks in darkness. He is a special correspondent for the Freedom TV channel, the only survivor from a film crew hit by a Lancet drone on the 23rd of October. 60 wounds cover his body, small and large. The doctors call his recovery a miracle. His first words are not about himself, but his team. "They were the best I ever had." He will walk again, they say. Whether he will see again is uncertain. This is how modern wars write their headlines, with names, not battles. Every drone strike is a signature of indifference, every photograph an argument with oblivion. And yet amid the devastation, there is a stubborn rhythm that refuses to fade. It beats in the hands that clear rubble, in the quiet defiance of those who return to rebuild, in the trembling voice that still calls this place home. The camera pans out, and Ukraine looks like a scar across the center of Europe. But look closer, and it is something more. It is a mirror reflecting the world's conscience. How quickly we grow numb to suffering when it is someone else's street, someone else's child. As night falls over the blackened fields, the hum of distant engines begins again. Another drone, another warning. And yet, in one of the broken houses, Ludmila lights a candle and hums a lullaby. For a moment, the fire does not destroy, it remembers. While Ukrainian cities burn, a quieter storm brews above Western Europe. It has no front line, no declaration, no soldiers. It begins with confusion, flight delays, closed airports, and a handful of witnesses pointing to the evening sky. Last week, the Belgian airspace was pierced by shapes no one could name. 6 drones, silent and deliberate, drifted above Kleine Brogel, a NATO base whispered to hold American nuclear weapons. The Belgian defense minister, Theo Franken, called the event a clear intelligence operation. He noted that the national radio frequencies had been altered mid-flight, something no amateur could achieve. At the same hour, Brussels International shut down. 40 flights canceled, 3,000 passengers stranded, and a quiet fear moving faster than any aircraft. What if this was not random? For days, the pattern repeated. Drones over Antwerp, drones over Liège. Even Norway and Denmark reported similar intrusions. Each time, the official statement read the same: origin unknown. In a world so wired, so monitored, so proudly digital, the phrase unknown origin should not exist. And yet, here it was, printed in every headline, murmured in every bar, hanging like a fog of uncertainty. The truth, of course, hides behind politics. Belgium sits at the heart of Europe's defense infrastructure. Beneath its quiet fields run communication lines linking NATO command from Brussels to Ramstein to Washington to the world. When that airspace is breached, it is not curiosity. It is a message. And whoever sent those drones wanted that message heard loudly. You are not as safe as you think. The irony is bitter. While Europe funds anti-drone systems for Ukraine, it cannot guard its own skies. After the incident, the Belgian army authorized live-fire protocols. Any unidentified drone over a military base may be destroyed without warning. Contracts were rushed to purchase radar systems, jammers, and signal interceptors. Yet no one can say what they are fighting or whom. To the average citizen, this might sound like a small inconvenience. A delayed flight, a closed runway. But to strategists, it is the most dangerous symptom of modern conflict, the blurring of war and peace. The drone that watches one day may strike the next. The hacker who listens today may shut down a power grid tomorrow. Inside Europe's intelligence community, whispers grow louder. Some claim the drones are Russian, a form of pressure against Brussels for freezing Moscow's assets. Others suspect private networks or rogue actors testing NATO's readiness. None can prove their case. And in that void of certainty, fear multiplies faster than facts. A man at the Brussels airport put it simply, speaking to a reporter after his canceled flight to Malaga, "I'm not angry. I am uneasy. Because if no one knows whose drone it was, then who controls our sky at all?" That question, more than any explosion, is what truly frightens Europe. From above, the continent looks calm, a quilt of lights and motorways, stitched together by centuries of civilization. But look closer and the pattern flickers. Each drone over Belgium is not just a trespass, it is a reminder that in the 21st century, invasion does not need tanks. It only needs signal strength. As the Belgian Defense Ministry concluded its statement that night, a single line stood out. Our airspace is monitored, but not yet understood. Perhaps that is the definition of the new era, when technology runs ahead of comprehension, when peace exists only until the next signal breach. Europe now finds itself between arrogance and anxiety, between believing it leads the world and realizing it cannot even protect its own skies. If you believe Europe should defend its airspace harder than ever, say amen in the comments below. Because the next time a drone passes overhead, it may not be just a test. It may be the first note of a war no one declared. In Brussels, the war sounds different. There are no sirens, no drones, no children hiding in basements. Instead, there are spreadsheets, memos, and the cold click of doors closing in government corridors. Yet here, too, another battle is being fought, one for control not of land but of meaning. At the heart of this conflict lies a sum so large that it bends reason, 140 billion euros. That is the value of Russia's frozen assets held by Euroclear, a financial fortress hidden behind marble and glass in the Belgian capital. To Ukraine, that money is salvation. To Moscow, it is theft. And to Europe, it is a test of conscience. Last week, Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo called an emergency meeting with the European Commission. His tone was measured, but his words betrayed the weight of the moment. If Moscow sues us, if they demand compensation, who will pay the price? Belgium cannot stand alone in this. Across the table, Brussels officials spoke of responsibility, legality, precedent. Behind their arguments, the truth trembled. Europe wants to help Ukraine, but not at the cost of its own stability. Politico reported that the Commission fears a financial domino effect. If the assets are misused or confiscated unlawfully, investors worldwide might flee European markets. Confidence, the invisible currency of global finance, would evaporate. And so, like generals in suits, the politicians weigh risk and reputation, principle and survival. But beyond the paperwork lies a moral puzzle that no economist can solve. Can justice be funded by another nation's frozen wealth? Can morality be measured in interest rates and legal clauses? The Commission's latest proposal offers a compromise. Allow member states to borrow internally using the frozen funds as collateral rather than cash. A bureaucratic sleight of hand, a gesture to make the moral look manageable, yet time is running out. Ukraine's budget deficit grows wider each month, its soldiers paid in promises, its hospitals in hope. And as winter closes in, Europe debates ethics while the front lines burn. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the response is quiet but sharp. The Kremlin warns of asymmetric measures. State television calls Brussels a thief in daylight. Diplomats smile for the cameras and speak of legal remedies, but everyone knows what that really means, retaliation in one form or another. Perhaps that is why, even as the drones appeared over Belgium, no one rushed to accuse Russia outright. Every accusation is a risk when 140 billion euros hang in the balance. The scene would be comical if it were not tragic. Governments that freeze assets in the name of justice now fear melting them for the same cause. A continent once united by ideals now paralyzed by its own reflection. In a way, the crisis reveals something deeper, that Europe's real weakness is not military or economic, but spiritual. It has lost the certainty that once made it bold. Every decision is a debate, every act of leadership a negotiation. There was a time when Europe could define the world. Now it can barely define its own rules. A senior EU official, speaking off record, said quietly to a journalist, We are fighting a moral war with legal tools. But law without courage is paperwork. Those words lingered longer than any press release. And perhaps that is the lesson of this entire episode, that in the modern era, war is not only fought with weapons, but with hesitation. The new battlefield is the boardroom. The new soldiers are those who dare to decide. As Brussels prepares another round of talks, the real question remains: when peace depends on a frozen account, who will thaw first? The money or the will? Power never stands alone. It gathers companions, conspirators, and believers. Some walk in daylight, others prefer the comfort of the dark. In early autumn, South Korean intelligence delivered a quiet but astonishing report. 5,000 North Korean construction soldiers had arrived in Russia. Their official purpose, to help rebuild infrastructure damaged by war. Unofficially, they were there for something else. According to analysts, many of these men were trained combat engineers, experts in fortification and logistics. They came armed not only with tools, but with ideology. For Moscow, the exchange was practical. Russia offered technology, energy, and food, the lifelines that Pyongyang's sanctions strangled economy desperately needed. In return, North Korea offered manpower and loyalty, the two commodities the Kremlin never undervalues. It was a barter written not in contracts, but in defiance. The symbolism was unmistakable. While the West isolates, the isolated unite. While Europe debates resolutions, the outcasts act. Every alliance carries a story. This one speaks of endurance, of two nations that have learned to survive by breathing beneath the weight of condemnation. Their handshake, invisible to most, echoes through the corridors of geopolitics like a quiet declaration: we are not gone yet. But Russia is not alone in its search for understanding partners. In the heart of Europe, another leader moves to the rhythm of defiance. Viktor Orban, Hungary's prime minister, a man fluent in both the language of Brussels and the language of rebellion, boarded a plane bound for Washington. His mission, a private meeting with President Donald Trump. Their agenda, at least on paper, was simple: peace in Ukraine, energy cooperation, and exemption from American sanctions on Russian oil. But behind closed doors, observers suspected something larger: the drawing of a new line, one that separates those tired of following from those ready to choose. Orban has long described himself as the last conservative in Europe. He sees the continent's current leaders as bureaucrats, not statesmen, men of process, not purpose. To him, sovereignty is not a slogan, but a survival instinct. And in that view, he finds a strange kinship with Moscow, even if he never names it aloud. When asked whether his meeting with Trump might anger Brussels, he smiled and replied, "Hungary does not need permission to breathe." That phrase, permission to breathe, carries the essence of the age. From Pyongyang to Budapest, from Tehran to Ankara, a new block of voices grows louder. They do not march under one flag, yet they share a single conviction: the world should no longer be ruled from one capital or in one language. It is a rebellion not of weapons, but of will. And while the West mocks these alliances as fragile, their persistence tells another story. They endure because they are born from necessity, not ideology. History reminds us that empires often fall not when they are defeated, but when the world around them stops needing their approval. That moment may be nearer than anyone in Brussels, London, or Washington dares to admit. When North Korean troops unload bricks in Russia's Far East, when Hungary defies sanctions, when forgotten nations find each other in silence, the world is not breaking down. It is reorganizing. Perhaps that is why Vladimir Putin never looks hurried. He understands that power, like gravity, does not vanish. It only shifts its orbit. And as the West grows weary of its own reflection, the shadows grow confident, learning to speak in the language of tomorrow. While politicians exchange threats and analysts debate sanctions, nature and chaos continue their quiet work. Far from the battlefields, another disaster strikes, not of ideology, but of wind and water. In the Philippines, the sky itself seemed to collapse. Typhoon Kalmayi tore through the islands with winds reaching 180 kilometers per hour. Whole towns disappeared under brown water. 66 lives confirmed lost, thousands missing, 500,000 without homes. People climbed onto rooftops waiting for rescue helicopters that would never arrive. One of those helicopters crashed, killing all 6 crew members aboard. No speech, no sanction, no alliance could stop it. The storm cared nothing for sides or slogans. And yet, for all its violence, the world barely noticed. The news ticker moved on within minutes, switching back to markets and war. That is the measure of our age, not what happens, but how quickly we forget. Across the ocean in Kentucky, a cargo plane exploded midair and fell in a rain of fire. 7 dead, 11 wounded, 4 of them on the ground. For a moment, America watched its own sky with the same fear Europe feels, the sudden awareness of fragility. Even in peace, the line between order and ruin is thin. I'm thin. Meanwhile, in Paris, a different story unfolds, one almost absurd in its irony. The City of Light has run out of room to bury its dead. Officials now hold a lottery for burial plots beside its famous residents: Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, Chopin. The winners will receive 4,000 euros to help restore old tombstones, a reward for the privilege of dying among legends. It sounds like satire, but it is true. In a world so crowded with life, even the dead must compete for space. And in Mexico, the news turns darker still. President Claudia Sheinbaum, the first woman to lead the nation, is assaulted in public by a drunken man during a street event. He hugs her from behind, tries to kiss her, touches her chest before guards pull him away. The footage spreads online. Outrage follows, then indifference. It is another sign of a world that has grown used to violation of bodies, of borders, of dignity. These stories, scattered across continents, seem unrelated. A typhoon, a plane crash, a cemetery lottery, a public assault. Yet together they form a pattern, the pattern of a civilization exhausted. A civilization so overwhelmed by information that tragedy has become background noise. We measure pain by attention, not by empathy. The deeper truth is that the world's crisis is not only political or military, it is moral. We have built systems so vast they can calculate the trajectory of a drone, but not the worth of a human life. We have learned to conquer the sky, yet forgotten how to look at one another. And still, amid all this, small acts of grace remain. A rescuer in Zaporizhia, carrying a wounded stranger through dust. A volunteer in Paris restoring a gravestone for someone he never met. A pilot in Kentucky who turns the plane away from the town below to spare others. Moments that whisper that compassion has not yet vanished, only grown quieter. Maybe the world does not need more leaders. Maybe it needs more listeners. Those who hear the pain behind the numbers, the silence behind the noise. When you watch the footage of destruction and feel nothing, remember this: silence is not peace. It is surrender. And the moment we stop feeling, the world unravels completely. In the end, what remains is not the noise of drones or the roar of typhoons. It is the silence, the long, heavy silence that follows every crisis when the cameras turn away. It is in that silence that nations reveal who they truly are. The missiles over Mykolaiv, the drones above Belgium, the frozen billions in Brussels, the strange alliances in Moscow and Pyongyang, they all belong to one story. It is the story of a world trying to decide whether it still believes in balance. For decades, the West wrote the rules. Now others are holding the pen. From Europe's parliament halls to Asia's dusty borders, from Paris's overcrowded cemeteries to the flooded villages of the Philippines, the same truth echoes. Power is shifting. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. Perhaps this is not collapse. Perhaps it is correction. Perhaps humanity is not falling apart, but shedding its arrogance, learning again that dominance is not destiny. And in that uncertain dawn stands a familiar figure, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. To some, he is a symbol of resistance. To others, a reminder of what the world fears most, endurance. He watches, waits, and lets the storm move around him, because he understands what the rest of the world has forgotten, that time is the final weapon and patience is its ammunition. History is turning again. The maps we know are fading, and a new geometry of power begins to form. It is uncomfortable. It is dangerous. But it is real. So we end with this question: will the coming years be written by the frightened or the free? Will we face the future with wisdom or run from it with noise? If this story touches something in your heart, do not scroll past. Like, share, speak up. Subscribe for stories and news to be spread. Because truth, like light, only survives when it is carried forward. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story, the kind they still do not want you to hear.